Okay, it says I'm live too. I had a reckless young life, but I made a lot of money. My last job after Job Corps was RCA Service Company Union, servicing TVs, appliances, putting up antennas on people's roofs, etc., etc. And 11 months I worked for them, I made over $33,000. That was mostly 68 and a little bit of 69. Then I got my draft notice. I tried everywhere. 4 generations, I was the last Bly to carry on the name. But wait a minute, there was 5 other Blys in the military in Vietnam. So that didn't make a difference. Conscientious objector didn't make a difference. I didn't know I had a courage of the spine I was born with, or I would have got out. So so I ran down to enlist to further my electronics training the Job Corps had given me and RCA Service Company had given me. And they promised me I'd get electronics. But after basic training, which I was very fit for, I went in at 380 and I came out at 460 on the test of 500. Pull ups, chin ups, sit ups, etc. What I failed on was the mile run. That's what I got the 60 on. Everything else I got 100 on. The other 4 groups, other 4 things. And they sent me to Fort Dix after Fort Bragg. We had 15 people die out of 500 from heat exhaustion in that summer of 19. 15 people. Yeah, we were the second deadliest basic training camp in the country. Paris Island was number 1, and Camp Lejeune was number 3. I think they had 16 die, and we had 15, and then Camp Lejeune had 14 die. They didn't let you stop. They didn't let you sit down. They didn't let you rest. Full packing gear. Boots that felt like 20 pounds. All the gear felt like another 30 or 40 pounds. And if you didn't pass out, you got your ass kicked and got back up and had to keep going. I mean, there was no shit about it back then. They didn't give a damn. It was 100, 105-degree, high humidity. But that was basic training. They sent me to Fort Dix. They told me I had to put spikes on my shoes and climb 100-foot telephone poles. I told them to kiss my ass. I went up there with a couple nails sticking out of my shoes. And they told me, court martial, I said, fine. Then they said, okay, you can be a truck driver or a cook. I'd already worked in a truck stop called Federal Diner in Beltsville before they had 95. It had 100 trucks a day stopping there for eating 24 hours a day. I'd worked for them during the summer at 12 years old. I did everything from cook to dishwasher to waiter to delivery to some cooking of the main meals. I didn't want that, so I said, what about my guarantee of being in electronics? Didn't you read the fine print? We don't have any openings in electronics. Either you're going to jail or you're going to be one of the truck driver or cook. I said, okay, truck driver. Well, I beat the record there driving the truck through mud up to the door around poles and shit in a swamp. I was flying because I was always a hot rod. I just couldn't back the loaded trailer that you couldn't see. It was 2 foot skinnier in your truck, so the rear view mirrors on either side wouldn't pick it up until it was already jackknifed on you. But my co-driver could, thank God. He wasn't a hot rod, but he could back that damn trailer perfectly. I could hot rod perfectly. So we won at the time, at the end, as the fastest truck driver. But then I hid out in the church. I said, I'm not going to Vietnam. Out of the company of truck drivers, which was about a 200 or 150 or so at Fort Dix, New Jersey, everybody that volunteered for Germany and Korea went to Vietnam. That dozen people out of the company that volunteered for Vietnam went to Korea or Germany. They figured you had to be crazy if you wanted to go to Vietnam, so they didn't send you there. Next thing I know, I'm on a plane out of Seattle, Washington, going to Vietnam. 24 hours of plane ride. I got in Tan Son Nhut, which assigned me to the 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red One. I went in. They said, we don't have any trucks to drive. And we're trying to get some more trucks, but the ones we have are junk. We're trying to wreck one now. Truck number A, Company A, Platoon 13, Truck 13. In other words, A313, 13 frontwards and backwards. They had about 20 ton on the son of a bitch, and they put it in gear with a brick on its gas pedal to go through a big, huge ditch, hoping to break the damn frame of it. When that didn't work, I said, let me have it. It was stripped. No doors, no windshield, no roof, no side racks on the back for people to sit on. Nothing. No tailgate. And paint was peeling off it everywhere. And some ball tires. My cousin came down, tuned it up, and took the governor off for me. Skipper, Dickie Boy. He was in the Marines out of Da Nang. He flew down and visited me when he found out I was there. I was a good car mechanic, but I wasn't a good diesel mechanic. He worked on diesel. Growing up, I worked on cars. After I saw that and I said I wanted it, they said, well, you got to pull KP tomorrow morning. And we'll let you have the truck if you could fix it up and get it running. Nobody wants to drive it because every time it goes out on the road, it breaks down. If it hears a boom or a bang or a crack, it stops running. It turns off. The truck's scared of any kind of action. So the next morning, I pull KP for the day. And first thing in the morning, I'm cleaning dishes off the table. And this pretty little girl with a whole bunch of other girls were cleaning dishes off the table. And I didn't watch. I turned around to take the dishes back, and I bumped into one of the little girls, little Vietnamese girls. And we both dropped our dishes on the floor. You couldn't break anything. Everything was metal. So it wasn't like dumping American dishes. The military makes sure you couldn't break them. Even had trouble bending them. And after we dumped them, I looked her in the eyes. She looked me back in the eyes. And we met mouth to mouth for about 1 second. And then we both went and jumped back. The rest of the day, I stayed on the other side of the room. Sitting there, what the hell am I doing? Pregnant as hell. That night, I went to sleep. And 4 times I had dreams of lifetimes with her. And when I'd kissed her and bumped into her, it was the first time in my life I felt overwhelming love, tenderness, sweetness surrounding me. Like God had come down and held me in his arms. But 4 lifetimes I was married to her. I woke up in the morning, I'm sitting there, whoa. All my cousins came home drug addict, alcoholics, and crazy as a lunatic. I can't be in 24 hours. I go back to the mess hall. Pull KP a second day. And she comes over to me and says, you're my husband. I said, you're pregnant. She says, I'm sorry. Sorry, I am. I got raped out of my father's farmhouse by Cambodia by soldiers, Vietnamese soldiers. I went out to pick up money from the people of father's farmland out there. He owns 100 acres. And it was too dangerous for the family to live out there, so he moved us in here. By Xi'an, Bulwa, Shaidan. Dead end road out in the middle of nowhere. Enemy area. GIs wouldn't even drive down that road in a Jeep because they'd get shot at. And it was about 5 miles out to my wife's house. There was a few houses out there, but very few. So, anyway, I'm sitting there, what, you're pregnant? She says, I was raped. And we sat down. And she said, I had a dream last night that we were married 4 lifetimes before. And she started discussing her dreams with me, and they were exactly the same dreams I had. Weird. I ain't never had anything like that since, though. But just her being near me made me feel so loved, so wanted, so cared, so safe, so everything for the first time in my life. Because I grew up in a bad house. A roaring bitch mom that was also a whore, liked sex with everybody. She liked money too. My father couldn't do both all the time. He worked 12-hour days to keep her in plenty of money until she spent it all. And then Dr. Bills took everything we owned away and threw us out on the street. And I was like 6 or 7 years old. And my dad became a roaring drunk and a mean drunk. Didn't even think I was his. But back to the story in Vietnam. The 3rd day, she brings in a Buddhist monk. And she says, you ready to get married? I'm sitting there. We're already married in our heart and our mind. I love you. I want you to be with me for the rest of my life. And she says, okay. We do it with the Buddhist monk I have here. So we did it. A short cemetery, a short service, very short, couple minutes. I didn't understand the word, but I had to ask her name, and she had to ask me my name because we know each other's names at that time yet. Just being close to each other made it so you can't really put the feeling in words. Then I fixed the truck up in a couple of weeks. I went up to E4 because I did. Within a month of being in Vietnam, going to Vietnam, you made E3 automatically. And then in a month, I was in E4. Rebuilt the truck totally and started running convoys and single action by myself. The little 1 bunker base camps on 1 acre of ground. Running them a week's supply of everything they needed. And running at night sometimes when they ran out of supplies and needed more claymores, more artillery rounds, more beer, of course. The beer over there, it would take a case to get drunk because it was only, they made it special for the veterans, 3.2. Hardly a drop of alcohol in the beer. While you're standing over the door and drinking, that's all that happened, basically. We slept with our weapons. We always had our weapons. Unless we were going to eat lunch or something, we'd leave them on our bed, which was just around the corner from the mess hall anyway. We all worked together. I didn't see hardly any drugs. Well, I never saw any drugs in the first. I did see a few people coming in that was in the infantry get drunk. But no violence, no fighting, no nothing. I hardly saw any black people, though. But much later on, after the war, I found out when I started asking questions, why weren't there very many blacks in Vietnam? There were a lot of blacks here in Fort Belvoir, my last duty station. And they said, well, all the discrimination going on and Martin Luther King running around yelling discrimination against blacks, that we sent them to Germany, left them here in America or Korea. And instead of putting them in arm's way, we only sent about 5% of the 25% of the blacks in the military to Vietnam. So we couldn't be accused of racism trying to eliminate them. I'm sitting there, that's nice. But anyway, the first was what together. Everybody had each other's backs, even the blacks. They were friends. We were all friends. Infantry, truck drivers, etc. In the first infantry, I put in 7-8 months, 23,000 miles on my Deuce and a half. Twice, when other trucks broke down on single lane roads, dirt roads, I ran up and pushed them because we were getting some sniper fire. We weren't really being ambushed, but we were getting, ping, ping, ping off the truck every once in a while. So I pushed them on ahead out of the sniper fire area. And twice at night from other bases, not Xi'an, where was my home base, where the 1st S&T was, 1st Infantry, Lockade, Dal Tiang, or some of the other bases we had to spend the night at. Twice I was called up because I could see in the dark to drive 20-some people in the back of my truck out to a firefight. I was about 100 yards from it. But there was bullets flying every damn where, bombs going off every damn where, you name it. And the people jumped off the back of the truck. I jumped out. And they said, get back in the truck. We already got you loaded. Go to such and such area. They had me loaded with wounded and dead. For me to take about a quarter mile out where there was a safe landing zone for a bunch of medevac helicopters coming in to transport them to get emergency help, the wounded, or to take the dead to the morgue. I did that twice while I was in the 1st. I did a lot of paperwork in the 1st on base. I had to get permission of everybody, from my 1st sergeant to my company commander to the battalion to the division to the 5-star general and the Pentagon. Everybody had to give you permission, and you had to get it all in 90 days. You had to have a JAG officer talk to you and had to have a minister talk to you and give permission. But that didn't bother me. We were one hell of a good unit. And in the 1st Infantry, everybody respected me and followed my lead because I always led them to safe areas. And I was so respected that they called me Captain Bligh and saluted me with their left hand, which got me in trouble a couple of times until officers understood. I'd walk in toward the mess hall, an officer, "Good morning. How you doing? Good morning. How you doing?" Walking between the officers and the enlisted people, and the officer turned around. "What the hell are you saluting left-handed for? And why are you saluting him left-handed?" "Well, don't you see his name is Captain Bligh?" "No, he's a Spec 4. Oh, I get it. He's Captain Bligh." We had a great time together, but most of our life, every time I made a friend, we moved, got evicted. I didn't have good clothes most of the time, so I had very few people that didn't laugh at me and bully me. So I got acquaintances, but I didn't get friends. I tried to stay my distance, except for my wife. I didn't touch my wife for a year and a half until she came to me for sex because she was so scared about being raped. I asked to stay there because another unit was moving in to Zion from a smaller base. They were closing a bunch of smaller bases and moving them to Zion, which was a larger base. Not a big base, but a larger base. They sent me to Chu Lai. I'd written Senator J. Glenn Bell of Western Maryland. As far as I know, he's a Republican. I never cared back then, know whether he was Republican or Democrat. He kept fighting for me. He even went to my father's trailer in Laurel and visited him and said he was helping me try to get married to my wife. In Chu Lai, there was a hell of a lot of alcoholics. Very little drug use, but all the guns were locked up. All the bayonets and knives were locked up. No access to them. Big 20 or 40-foot steel boxes of them locked. When I was in Chu Lai for 6 months. One night toward the end, back in the 1st, I got 2 Army Accommodation Medals for outstanding service. And I was put up for E5 about 3 months before we were pulled out. But they had to stop any promotions because of the withdrawal notice they had. But in Chu Lai, we had a couple people come through the bunker line and get to the box. But the guards had woken up and shot them. But we're running around trying to find the guy with the key to get our guns, hoping it's not a human wave attack. Once we found the guy, he opened it up. There was I think an M14 and an M1 and no ammo. So we had to find a guy with the ammo bunker key. And that was almost totally depleted. But no M14, no M1 ammo in it, just M16 ammo. And AM60 ammo, mainly AM60 ammo. So our CO says, "You want to go up there or you want to go to the beach?" Because we're between a mountain and a ocean, South China Sea. So we went down and walked down the beach. We were told to go back because the shooting had been over with for about a half an hour. And they asked me to go out and turn around the claymores, put the blasting caps back in the flue gas 55-gallon drums, and pull some of the razor wire, barbed wire back straight. Layer after layer after layer after layer for over 200 feet out in front of the bunker. I was out. Pitch black dark because they shot out all the lights just before they were shot at the bunker. So I came back in. They gave me another Army Accommodation Medal for outstanding service and wanted to put me in for a second Purple Heart. In the 1st Infantry, when we were coming back in from guard duty, I was shot. Friendly fire by an M79, which is a hand grenade shot out of a big shotgun-like gun. But I had to turn 28 revolutions to explode. Hit me in the shoulder, almost knocked me through the side of the truck. I broke the wood on the side of the truck and hit me so hard in the shoulder. Bounced off of me, went out about 15 feet, and blew up. Thank God nobody was hurt. I almost killed that son of a bitch. Telling me, oh, it's not loaded, and pulls the trigger while pointing it at me. And now I told him, no Purple Heart. I wasn't wounded by the enemy. This was idiot friendly fire. A guy should be court-martialed for not checking his weapon. And now I go out, not under fire, maybe a threat of fire, but it never happened, and got cut up by barbed wire while rearming the whole bunker area of a dozen things. I told him I didn't deserve it. So I was actually going to be put in for 2 Purple Hearts. But one was friendly fire and the other one was hazardous duty, but not under fire. Under previous fire, but nothing happened the rest of the night. So I didn't deserve a Purple Heart. If there was somebody out there shooting at me, I would have accepted the Purple Heart. But that didn't happen. But there was a lot of drunk people in Chu Lai. A lot of anger. And as I said, all the weapons were hidden. I extended 6 months to stay in Vietnam if they promised to move me back down to Xi'an to be with my wife so I could finish the paperwork by Saigon. They agreed. I came home for 30 days. All my friends wanted me to get an American girl. But I didn't want an American girl. I wanted my wife for the 5th time. I didn't have any sex or anything when I came home. I wasn't really interested in all the girls my friends were hooking me up with around. A few friends had hooked me up with. Telling me she's probably just a prostitute. Like my dad kept saying. Because we lived in an Army trailer park, basically, near Fort Meade. Half the trailers were rented or owned by military people stationed at Fort Meade. Or their wives were there in the trailers while they were overseas somewhere. Anyway, I got back. I almost died. I overslept by 5 or 10 minutes. out of Seattle, Washington. I was supposed to be on a flight. They came and woke me up and says, "Where in the hell are you going? You got the next flight in 10 minutes, 5 minutes or something." So I jump on the flight and we go to Alaska for refueling. They were going to Hawaii for refueling. In Alaska, we heard they didn't make Alaska. They made about 5 miles before it, and for some reason, the airplane went in the water and everybody dead, blew up. I was supposed to be on that flight. I was scared to death. But the rest of the way to Vietnam was okay. We landed in Tan Son Nhut, Pan Am, which was the main carrier. 99% of the people coming and going from Vietnam was by Pan Am. They'd bought hundreds of planes that could carry 300 and some people and travel around the world. We landed in Tan Son Nhut, and there's this 2-engine plane. I think it's a C-130 or 140 or something like that. Has 2 little jet engines and underneath the wings and 2 prop engines. So it could take off very short runways as a big belly plane to take me from Tan Son Nhut 150 miles or 200 miles up to Chu Lai in Vietnam. We're flying up along the ocean, and one of the engines caught fire. We could see the smoke. And he said, "Don't worry about it." He turned off the engine and the fire went out. Well, then the other engine catch fire. And he says, "I got to turn it off." He says, "We're going down. You want to go in the ocean or you want to go in the woods?" We picked the ocean, as close to the beach as we could get. As we were going down, he hit the jet engines, which gave us another couple 100 foot up. And he managed to start the engines, and they weren't burning this time. They were running. I'm sitting there, whoa. What's going on with this? We land in Chu Lai. A guy from the base was there waiting for me to pick me up to take me back to the other side of Chu Lai, which was about 5-8 miles, because there was a big Air Force base and Army base and Navy base and stuff there, with a lot of big planes and a lot of jet planes, a lot of small observer planes. I said, "Can we stop at the sick hall?" So he pulls in, and there was about 100 people standing around and a shortage of doctors. The doctor was sick. They only had 1 doctor and not 2 or 3 like they usually had. I said, "No, just take me back to base." I was sick as a dog with pneumonia from that 30 days. I go back to the base, and we had a rocket attack. I heard some rockets hit that sick call area, and some people were badly hurt. I said, forget about the bunker. Forget about the hooch. I'm moving all my stuff down to the bunker next to it, where I stayed for the next few days. That was 3 times I could have died, but God protected me. But at Chu Lai, I got out of driving a truck after a week or 2. I only drove one for a week or 2. They had a unit called Avionics North. They repaired code senders, GPS senders, and ham radios, basically. And a lot of aircraft was down because the radios and navigation equipment or code senders were broken. Because if they flew out of Vietnam into Laos or Cambodia or in North Vietnam, they had code was sent from the ground up to them, and their code sender would send back the day's code to say were Americans. That didn't work. They would call them up on the radio. And when Avionics North found out I had 2 years of electronics experience, they said, please, 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 come over and show us what you can do. I didn't want to be around all those drunks anyway, and pot-smoking assholes. There wasn't a lot of drugs, but there was enough that you could tell the people were high if they weren't drunk. And I didn't want to go out on the road with drunks or high people. So Avionics North hired me and says, you wanted to be in Avionics North? You wanted to do electronics and they made you a truck driver? How stupid are you? Everybody that works here wanted to be a truck driver and they told them they had to fix electronic stuff and they didn't know a damn thing about it. Well, I did a lot of bad stuff. You had to wait for the part to come in, and you weren't allowed to open the metal boxes and most of this stuff because they were top secret. And you weren't allowed to see how they were made up, the code senders or the GPS senders that would tune into a radio station, because we put a lot of radio stations to help guide our military in. The GPS would lock on the radio station and guide it back to the airport they came from. I took boxes out of one. Some of them had 5 boxes, but only one was bad. I took 4 boxes out and fixed 4 other radios with it. And then I opened a lot of boxes because they had all the equipment there, the oscilloscopes and the meter readers and all the other shit. And all the spare parts, transistors and capacitors and you name it there. But you weren't allowed to open them. I opened them and fixed them. I knew how I was fixing. I got 100 aircraft back up in less than a month off the ground. Because the military is stupid. It's just like with my deuce and a half. And with the first, oh, you can't get a starter off this junk truck. I'm sitting there blown to hell. Can I get the starter off? No, you're not allowed to take any parts off the truck. I said, well, I'll put my old part back on. And I need a windshield. I need doors. I need the roof, canvas roof. I need the side racks on the back that pop down so people can sit in the back of the truck. I want to fix it all up, and I want some paint. And I finally agreed with the junkyard sergeant to let me go in and get all this stuff illegally. Because it was against military regulations. You had to wait for the parts to come from the U.S., and that took 6 months. All that shit broken down, you weren't allowed to fix off blown up stuff. You weren't allowed to pull a motor out of a deuce and a half, put it in your deuce and a half, or anything like that. Even though it was a good running motor, the truck was blown up though. But the motor was still good, or it started off the motor, which is stupid. Just like the radios that I was fixing. Oh, you diagnose which box is wrong, and each box was marked under penalties of federal law up to 20 years in jail if you open this box. I opened them. I fixed them. I got our aircraft back up in the air. I couldn't care less about all the stupid laws. You can't exchange 4 of the boxes out of the 5 to fix 4 of the radios and end up with 1 radio with 5 bad boxes in it instead of 5 radios with 1 bad box in each one. That's stupid. But that's how the military operated, I found out. But they told me to go to hell. I wasn't going back down where my wife was. Senator J. Glenn Bell forced them to send me back down to a base near Zion. I forget the name of it. But I found my wife could come up and see me there, even though she still worked at Zeon in the same mess hall, but for a new unit. And she was mad as hell. The blacks were running around grabbing her pussy, excuse her, pulling her pants down, fondling her breasts. And they were doing it to all the Vietnamese women, especially the blacks were, treating them worse than dogs, this new unit. And a lot of alcoholism and drug abuse. My wife hated blacks when she came to America, refused to go to a job that had any blacks working there because of the abuse she got from them in Vietnam. Senator J. Glenn Bell finally had me transferred to Zeon for, I think, 30 days, where I found out my wife's home address. I'd taken my wife out to the corner 5 miles from her house, but the corner of the street, where all the Vietnamese went all different directions, all 4 ways. Some toward Long Binh, some toward Ben Hoa, some back toward Zeon, and some out where my wife lived. Every afternoon, they'd pick them up there and 6 o'clock in the morning and take them back at 6 o'clock at night. And when that unit pulled out, they were shipping me back to Da Nang or someplace. And Senator J. Glenn Bell stopped the military from doing that and moved me to Long Binh. The biggest nightmare I ever had in my life. The blacks were running around, tying their shoelaces into things around their neck and their arms and stuff, yelling black power and beating up whites, running around in gangs all over the fucking base. Whites were running around yelling KKK. 80% of the base was either high or drunk and would hit you over the head if they thought you had $1 so they could get high again. And you couldn't go in the hooch without getting high because it was so smoke full of people doing drugs. So the first couple of days I was there, I snuck out because I worked nights, unloading reefer trucks from Thompson Nude Air Base. So into refrigerators or freezers to be dispersed in the morning to the mess halls around. I snuck out to my wife's house. She yelled at me, you can't wear military clothes, you'll get killed out here. And don't bring a gun. I said, I don't have any gun because they were all hidden in Long Binh. This was 1971, January to July. Terrible base. But the GIs had nothing else to do than fight among themselves. And I saw a couple of white GIs there that I thought were terrible. They had pictures of their wife and children. But they also had 10, 15, 20 marriage certificates to Vietnamese women. Well, why should I pay for sex? I don't like prostitutes. I like virgins. And it only costs $5 to marry them. And then they think they're legally married to you, so they let you have sex with them. And America didn't recognize this. And once they had sex with a man, they were kicked out of their communities, kicked out of their home. Their families disowned them. They were considered prostitutes, especially if it was American or black. Even more, because the Vietnamese learned to hate the blacks by 71. Because they treated them worse than animals. Not all blacks, I knew a lot of good blacks. They hated what the other blacks were doing too. Just like I hated what the whites were doing, marrying the Vietnamese, pretending them like they loved them so they could get another virgin with a half a dozen marriage certificates up on their bedboard on the wall, thumbtacked to the wall as a joke. And they were married back here anyway. So I learned to sleep out at my wife's house. And she made me Vietnamese clothes. I was so small, and I wore sunglasses. And when I rolled down the hill across the street from the gate of Long Bend, I'd jump on a truck to go out the gate and tell them to slow down. I'd jump off the truck where nobody could see me roll down the hill from the base. I'd be out of my military uniform and into my Vietnamese clothes and jump on a Lambretto and ride 8 or 9 miles, maybe 10 miles out to my wife's dead end. And within a week, going to Saigon on the back of a Honda, my brother-in-law drove me, and another person drove my wife to do paperwork in Saigon to bring my wife here, and my new daughter, even though she wasn't mine DNA, but I was helping raise her and bringing food to the house for her and diapers and stuff for her. Because my wife was out of work then. I slept out at my wife's house. My wife said, as long as you don't bring a gun, I'll protect you. I didn't know her father was a colonel in the Ho Chi Minh Army. But I'd retired for about 5 years already. I was right given a French plantation out by Cambodia. Because he was such an outstanding service member, helping defeat the Japanese and then the French. But by the time the Americans was here, he was almost 70 years old. So they retired him. He told the people, leave me alone. But he also didn't want my wife to marry me. And he loved his granddaughter too. Even though it was from a rape. Most of my wife's family didn't know it was my wife's daughter, because my wife stayed away for many months, saying it was too hard to go to work. Every morning, so she stayed at a friend's house closer to work while she was pregnant and gave birth. And then when she brought the daughter home, she said it was her sister's daughter, which was had been taken by the Viet Cong and worked as a nurse underground to help their wounded people and sick people. It was her daughter. But did all the paperwork in her name, because it was her daughter. That was born January 28th, 1970, while I was trying to get back down. No, that was 71. 70, I was still in Xi'an with the first, when she took off for 2 weeks to give birth. She only took 2 weeks off from my oldest daughter and my youngest daughter. Went right back to work. Pregnancy didn't bother her too much. Now for the son, she wanted to stay home and breastfeed him and everything for a long period of time. She really adored having a boy. The 2 daughters she loved, but she overloved her son. She wouldn't go back to work for a year with the son. But Long Bend kept getting worse and worse and worse. I saw MPs shoot people, charging them with a knife or a stick with their .45 and kill them. Stoned out of their head, these people that the MPs had to shoot. Long Bend had the jail of Vietnam. If you broke the law in Vietnam, military or civilian law, they put you in Long Bend jail. They didn't send you home to jail. You had to serve your 13 months, whether it was in jail in Long Bend or in a unit in Vietnam. And then they sent you home to a jail here after the 13 months. But the first week I bought a silver-plated, pearl-handle military 45 for $20 in Saigon on the black market. That was a lot of money, but I needed it. I hid it on the side of the road when I left Long Bend to go out to my wife's house, and I picked it up to go in to hide under my shirt for safety. So the blacks couldn't beat me up and rob me, or the whites couldn't beat me up and rob me. I didn't want nothing to do with either side. It was terrible what they were going through. And the drugs and the alcohol. I was out of my wife's house at least 5-6 days every week. And when I was on base, I'd hold my breath, run in, get some clothes, run out, and take a shower or a bath. Well, it was all showers. There was no baths. And sleep next to the hooch, covered up with covers so the mosquitoes wouldn't eat me alive. That's terrible living. With racism, the drug and alcohol abuse. When I came home, they forced me on an airplane, handcuffed me to the seat, July 4th, 1971, saying I was going home. I didn't need my wife. Senator J. Glenn Bell had me extended 30 days a couple of times. But he couldn't get me extended anymore. And he couldn't do anything with the Vietnam government. I came home crying. Got off the plane here. Got blood thrown on me, cussed, spit on, just like I had when I came home on that 30-day leave out of July. And cussed and spit on, trying to go back to Vietnam through Seattle. Even though I was in civilian clothes. They knew I had my military bags with me. It was terrible hatred, spitting at us, cussing us, calling us baby killers, crazies. I came home and cried. I went straight to work to raise money so I could go back if I ever could. I tried to re-enlist to go back, but nobody could put it in writing I would go back. The war was winding down quickly. By July of 71, we were from 700,000 down to 300,000 already. And troops were coming home thousands a day. Many thousands a day. Everything was over with basically by the middle of 72. All of our troops had been withdrawn. So there was no going back. My sister, that I hate the guts of, said she knew Wolfman Jack at WWDZ Radio, a famous talk show host that could talk real fast sometimes. And you'd miss what he was saying. You had to think about what he said. He said it so fast. He called me into a show at WWDZ Radio a couple of times for hour, 2-hour talk shows. They went on and on and on because we had so many call-ins from other GIs and stuff. But nobody wanted to give their name. Well, I'm stationed at Fort Belvoir driving officers around from the Pentagon to Aberdeen to the White House. You name it. And I say, Dietrich. And once I did that, my sister said she knew somebody at the Washington Post, a reporter, that might be interested in the story. They were interested in the Vietnam part, but not the American part. But they did do some in the American part. When I told them every damn person that worked for the Vietnam government kept telling me, if you want it today or tomorrow, that'd be $100, or come back in 6 months We might have the paperwork done for your wife. Every damn one of them. They're getting paid by the South Vietnamese government to work in these offices, and they want bribes or they wouldn't do it. Very corrupt government. All of them were corrupt as hell. The Washington Post did that story, but they also found hundreds of guys that were saying the same thing, but they wouldn't come forward. I was in military uniform when they took my picture, with a picture of my wife and stepdaughter next to me. In the Washington Post, they sold like 2 million newspapers worldwide. That was September 21st, 1971. GI fights U.S. in Vietnam was to bring his wife here. That was the headline over my several, maybe a dozen paragraph article, over 2 pages. And I was in uniform. And they said, Raymond J. Bly, Spec 4, stationed at Fort Belvoir as a chauffeur for officers. They called in officers around the world immediately after that newspaper from every base in the world just how to shut us up. Because all the other GIs started writing their congressmen and senators and their newspapers saying the same thing was going on. Even though it was white marrying white, it didn't have to be mixed race. It just had to be somebody from another country. That they immediately shipped you out of the country. The embassies wouldn't tell you the right paperwork to do. They ran you around circles. I mean, it was all corrupt as hell because the embassies in these countries, U.S. embassies, would run you around helping the military to stop all these foreign marriages because they were all prostitutes, according to the embassies and the military. Then Jim Vance, News 4 Washington, called me up and wanted to interview me on film, on camera, for an hour talk show. And cut in with other GIs that wanted to stay hidden. Well, I'm in military uniform. It was supposed to come out November 1st. It partially came out, but they cut most of it out. They just did it as a 3-minute news story quickly. Because I was heading back to Vietnam. But just before it came out, the Friday before it was supposed to come out, John Westmoreland calls me in his office. Well, called my 1-star general from Fort Belvoir that I was driving. I was standing by Westmoreland's door because I had top security clearance for everything. I could go everywhere except the far basement of the Pentagon where the red buttons were for the nuclear weapons. That's the only room I couldn't go in. Or any occupied rooms like General Westmoreland's room. I could knock and say hi, but that's about it. He told my general to go back. They found out I was stationed at Fort Belvoir, and my name was Bly. I was a Spec 4. I was a driver at Fort Belvoir for officers. Hell, it'd been a month and a half. The Washington Post told them where I was, but it took them a month and a half to find me. And they still didn't know exactly who I was. My 1-star general ran out, come down the hall, grabbed me and said, you know Bly? He's supposed to be a driver at Fort Belvoir. That's been in newspapers and radio shows and everything. I'm sitting there, yes, sir, reporting. He grabbed me around the arm and yanked me around the corner and says, please don't tell him what we've been saying we're going to do to you. Because they said they're going to hang me up by my balls on some deserted island and let me starve to death and bake to death with the sun. They were telling all kinds of things they were going to do to me in the back seat, front seat, not knowing I was driving them. I go into General Westmoreland's office. I couldn't break from attention. I peed my pants. I was so damn scared. And General Westmoreland kept saying, take it easy, take it easy. We're going to let you out of the military. So I think that will help you get your wife. I says, how can I get to Vietnam? Well, we're going to give you an extra 90 days of pay. You already got 90 days coming to you. That should help with the airplane ticket to go back and get her. I said, well, I'm not allowed to go. He says, don't worry about that. This is Friday night at 9, 10 o'clock at night. He said, can you report in at 7 a.m. to your base commander? I'm sitting there, Saturday morning? Okay. I usually didn't work very many weekends unless called in. I show up, they had a passport with my picture in it and an open-ended visa to go to Vietnam as a civilian, not connected with the military, not connected with the news, not connected with defense contractors. I think I was the only civilian that was ever allowed to go to Vietnam that wasn't connected to anybody, just going there as a visitor to get my wife. They also warned me that I could not be in any base camp. I could not carry any weapons, and I had to abide by Vietnam law. But besides that, I was on my own. I go to Vietnam, and we start going to all these damn places again to get the police report, to get this report, to get a passport, to get stamps, to go to the embassy. Everybody had a copy of the Washington Post on their counter. 2 months it had been sitting there. Well read. You could see it and gone through many, many times, but by the page looks. And the Vietnamese would say, you better watch your back here. You shouldn't be talking bad about us, wanting bribes to give you all the paperwork. Or how dare you condemn the military and the embassies? You're not American doing that stuff. That's what the embassy said to me. They were screaming at me. I told them they better do the paperwork or I want to call Senator J. Glenn Bell again. They shut up and sat down and did the paperwork. But I didn't know, while those months went by, Senator J. Glenn Bell and hundreds of other congressmen and senators had enacted a visa called K-Visa to help all defense contractors, all people in the military be able to marry their wives. All you had to do was bring her here for 2-week visitor pass. And the embassy had to grant, if a GI signed or a defense contractor signed for their being a visitor to America, they had to let them come here for a 2-week vacation. And if you married her in the continental United States in that 2 weeks, she got a green card. She could stay as your legal spouse, married spouse. I did that with hundreds of other GIs backing me, but wouldn't show their face, wouldn't show their uniform. I don't know how I got away with it, being in a newspaper with my uniform on, my tan uniform, dress uniform, because that's the one I had to wear driving officers around. I couldn't wear my greens. It was my khakis. Anyway, I got all the paperwork done in about a week. And my father-in-law said, no, your wife can't come. And I'm not letting my granddaughter come. All you got to do is sell her into prostitution, I've been told. That's what Americans do with the Vietnamese girls they take home. I'm sitting there, no, I'll stay and show you I'm not going to be a good husband to her. Is there any houses around here I can rent? And where can I get a job? He said, no, it's too dangerous for an American to be around here. You'll be killed. I'll let your wife come, but I won't let the granddaughter come until you can guarantee me you got a job, you got a building, you got a house to take care of her.
You say you have nothing right now. I'm sitting there. I'm a good worker. I'll make the money. And we'll have a house and a place to live within a week or two of getting home. He says, no, I'm not letting your granddaughter come until you prove that you have this stuff. Anyway, when I went down to book the flight, Pan Am had gone up $500 on the round trip ticket that I'd bought for my wife. I cashed in half of it. That still wasn't enough to bring my wife and granddaughter. And since my granddaughter couldn't come, I cashed in her ticket to cost like $150. And that still wasn't enough to pay for my wife to come. I had to call home and have my dad go to Pan Am and give him $75 more because they were only flying one way now. They weren't flying two ways. They weren't bringing loads of people there and loads of people home. They were just bringing loads of people home as fast as they could. Pan Am went bankrupt within a couple months after Vietnam because they had so many airplanes they still had to pay for, not realizing the Vietnam War was going to end and the military didn't need to charter them anymore that often. So I bring her home. But before I brought her home, for the couple of months I was home before I went back to get her, I met a lot of Vietnamese women. I'd walk up to anybody who looked Vietnamese and said, are you Vietnamese? You live around here? Because hundreds are coming because of the K visa, thanks to me. In the mid-October through December from Fort Meade, moving in. I said, can I have your phone number and your address? Because I'm bringing my wife here, and I know you're probably homesick, and my wife will be, and you'll have a friend. First night my wife was home, I took her up street about 3 trailers to meet a Vietnamese girl. Tuet Clark. Her husband was Charlie Clark. He was in the Army at Fort Meade. He had just come home from Vietnam. And with his wife under the K visa. I got a job. I lived with my parents for 6 or 8 weeks. Moved out into a 1-bedroom furnished apartment. All utilities included. It was $75 a month. And it wasn't a tiny apartment. I was having trouble surviving. But then my wife got pregnant, and the people told me no babies were allowed. It was only 1 bedroom. And under PG law, you had to have 2 bedrooms if you had a child. So we rented a 2-story, no basement, small townhouse, $110 a month, and we had to pay utilities and furnish it. But I was making $1.25, and my wife was making $1.05 or $1.10, which was minimum wage. She was making minimum wage. I was making barely more than that. Then I became a truck driver in the end of '74. We were able to save up to buy this house here. It cost me like $1,800 to move in this house. 1% down because we paid $17,000 for it, and the closing costs under VA. GI Bill 9% was a good mortgage interest rate back then. And 75. I tried to re-enlist in the military. The recruiter says, I don't understand all these codes. Let me call the Pentagon. And he comes back over, he says, If you were the last man to defend the United States of America, I couldn't give you a gun and I couldn't let you in the military to do it. What the hell did you do? I stood up against them. And it was the best thing I ever did in my life. We were together 48 years. We had some disagreements. We never was going to get divorced. I did separate 3 days from her because of her family living with us and her lying brother, who wasn't the same after he married that bitch. They cheated everybody. They probably cheated taxes. They committed welfare fraud. And the prosecution was stopped because there were supposed to be witnesses against me. And given all the welfare and schooling and everything else. And citizenship. After they were going to be prosecuted by another county for welfare fraud. Saying I stole all their money until I told them to check their bank account to find thousands of dollars in their bank account. And they were only in America 10 months. Somebody had to be paying all their bills for them. That was me. Food, buying them a car, teaching them how to drive, everything, getting them both jobs instantly when they came. Getting their kids in Head Start. Because they were both young. But that's my military experience. From the great unit, the 1st Infantry, where everybody had each other's back, we slept without guns. We lived without guns. We protected each other. In villages, on the roads, and in base. To a unit, there was a lot of alcoholism, where the guns were all hidden. To a unit, my last unit in Long Bend for 6 months, where 80% of the base was either high or drugged. And they'd all hit you over the head for $1. And racism was running rampant. And big fights and rumbles. The DMV had trouble cleaning up and had to shoot some of the people killing them. Because they were so hyped up. But the military, when we came home that way, which I didn't because I never tried drugs, and I didn't like drinking, never drank. I didn't want to be an alcoholic like my father. And all I did was kick you out of the military, which wouldn't even let you get benefits to help get you over the stuff that the military caused you to have. Dishonorable discharge. You couldn't go to a VA hospital for treatment for drug abuse that you learned in Vietnam, or alcoholism, or PTSD, or within a few years, Agent Orange. Vietnam was the deadliest American war we've ever had, with death tolls of 2 million American servicemen so far. Out of 2.4 million that's died, estimated 2 million died from Agent Orange diseases and cancers. And the first million wasn't even acknowledged by our government as causing their death. So they didn't get a penny. No health care, no nothing. And the thousands that came home that was kicked out of the military ended up homeless or in jail instead of treatment at a VA hospital for PTSD or drug abuse or alcoholism. 15% came home and ended up homeless or in jail after being kicked out of the military. There were tens of thousands of us that came home normal. Well, somewhat normal. I never shot my gun in Vietnam. I never had a chance to. I was too busy ducking and stepping on the gas when we got ambushed a few times. It wasn't a lot, and it was all over with within a minute or two. Because we were down the road too far from them to keep shooting. And our gun jeeps were going after them already. So that's life in the military. And Iraq and Afghanistan, our troops still came home all fucked up mentally, and some alcoholics and some drug abusers. The military tell you about them now? No. They want to hide all this stuff, what the military does to you, mentally and physically. Vietnam should go down the history of the deadliest war we've ever had. 2 million Americans have died. 6 million Vietnamese are dead due to a chemical warfare we used that we knew was going to kill all life eventually. The drug companies refused to make it. We had to threaten them with jail and complete immunity if they made it. We even paid the Vietnam government $630 billion in 1979 to hide a lawsuit they sued against us to treat their sick from 30 diseases and cancers, which we still won't acknowledge all of them. Well, GIs after GIs, hundreds a week are still dying. There's only about a little 400 to 500,000 of us left. So think about this. With Vietnam Memorial Day coming up, I think it's the 29th of March. Thank you, Trump, for giving us a Vietnam Memorial Day. It's not a national holiday, but it should be. You know, I didn't tell anybody I was in Vietnam for 20 years because they'd look at you funny if you told them you were in Vietnam. They would treat you funny. After 5 or 10 years here, I wanted to join American Legion and VFW. You know what the response was? We don't want you drug addicts and baby killers in our organizations. Get the hell out of here. You weren't even in a war. By the World War II veterans. They left Korea alone, but most Korean veterans didn't want to belong to them either because the World War II was so snotty. But statistics say 95 to 98% of Vietnam veterans saw some kind of bombing or bullets or something. Even though I didn't fire a gun, I consider myself a combat vet because I was ambushed at driving the roads. We were rocketed and mortared at night because we lived in supply units that supplied all the small units around us and the infantry out in the field, which they wanted to blow up our fuel and our ammo. I still feel guilty of killing hundreds of innocent people by transporting all the boom boom that everybody needed to kill them with. Artillery shells, claymores, hand grenades, M79, and regular bullets. When we should have been an ally to Vietnam. Ho Chi Minh won the war a year almost before we did against Japan and offered us bases there. Naval bases, army bases, air bases. So Japan couldn't re-attack them and take back over. It wasn't called Vietnam back then. It was called Indochina, French Indochina. France was totally wiped out, defeated, and slaughtered by the Japanese. Ho Chi Minh totally wiped out and slaughtered and kicked out the Japanese from Indochina. At the end of World War II, in Geneva, we named them 3 countries and told France they could have Vietnam again, to work their people as slaves, to steal their mineral resources. And Ho Chi Minh says, the hell they will. And he finally won the war against France and kicked them out, where we had to go in. He was now a communist. Vietnam is so much freer than we are. They don't have these liberal bitch women in all these community associations that want to tell you how you have to live. in your own home. You can't plant a flower in your front yard. You can't do this. You can't put an antenna on your roof for TV channels. You can't do all of the kind of stuff. You can't open the hood of your car to check your oil or water or change your battery. All kinds of shit. And they can fine you and put it right on your property taxes with no court hearing. These damn community associations, homeowners associations, and everything else. You think you're free? Since the early 1900s, we have not been free. Since the Supreme Court ruled property taxes. We no longer own our property, which the Constitution guaranteed us to, with no involvement from the government, except if they needed it for a highway or a school. Now they needed to make more taxes, they can take it from you by the Supreme Court ruling. There was no federal taxation until the Supreme Court in the early 1900s. There was state taxation, but not federal. I want to talk about our country in the future. I just talked about my Vietnam experience. And it was the best and the worst. I met the love of my life. And I can't wait to go back and have a sixth marriage with her. When I met her, we had 4 lifetimes together, and we made a 5th one, 48 years together. I couldn't ask for a better partner, a better helper. We worked together on everything. We shared everything. I wanted to help make her happy. She wanted to help make me happy. We worked for the betterment of the other one. We gave in. We compromised. We worked together. Neither one of us was the boss. We were partners in this life. And I miss her so much. God bless you all for listening for an hour and a half. And this is on YouTube under Vietnam. And I'm also live on Facebook on my cell phone here. So I'm getting off of here. And remember, sit down with your family. Invite some neighbors over sometimes. But require them to leave their electronic devices by the door turned off. So you can actually talk to each other. You can actually sit down and talk about what's going on. And what you think about situations or how you're doing in school, etc., to your children. Remember, cell phones are the biggest evil that's ever happened. They're also one of the best things that ever happened. You got to keep them the best things, not the evil things. So, good night. God bless.